All right, so here we have a component that is rendering some dummy content with some static content of a list of courses, and it's being rendered right through the component side, right, of the TypeScript side of this, right, and it's being we're referencing that HTML that renders that content. So what I'd like to be able to do is that instead of rendering that static HTML content, we would like to make this maybe dynamic. Right? And to make it dynamic, it is the responsibility of the TypeScript to provide the data that the HTML is then going to render. Okay, that's how we split the responsibility. Right? The TypeScript is playing the role of the controller in a model view controller architecture. Right? The view is being the role of the view is being played by the HTML. The HTML, we just give it data, and then it renders that data. Right? It doesn't care where that data came from. It cannot manipulate that data. Right? It's only a read-only data. Yes? And the controller is being implemented by the component side, right? Where it fetches the data, it can receive some event handling, right? And then implement and make those changes and change the model, and then the model can then be re-rendered by the view, right? So let's provide some data. For instance, we might declare here a list of courses, as an array of objects, right? Where we might have here a primary key with 1, 2, 3. Actually, 1, 2, 3. We might have a couple of titles. So title, this might be course A, and we might have a couple of these. So we have some unique identifiers, and this would be B. Oops. B, C, and D, right? And this variable declared in the component is considered to be a state variable. Any variable that you declare in your component, right, is already accessible in the company HTML, right? There's no such thing as a state variable and then object, and then you put stuff in your state object. Yes. In here, any variable that you declare in your component is a state variable, and there's a readily accessible in the HTML. So for instance, in my HTML, I could say, well, how many courses are there? We can say courses. Notice that my IDE already knows that there's a state variable declared in the accompanying TS file, right? So there it is. So courses, and I can say dot length. It's an array, right? So if I go back to my rendering, notice that it renders 4. We know there's 4 elements, 4 objects in that array. And I could iterate over that, right? I could iterate over it by specifying that I want an li, right? And the way we iterate is different in Angular than the way we iterate in React. The way you iterate in React is that you would embed here JavaScript, right? And you would do courses.map. Blah 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 blah, right? And you're iterating over that array. Here we don't have that. We don't have JavaScript. Instead, what we have instead is an extension of the HTML language, right? Again, since you are in the HTML world, right, all manipulation or all access to the data should follow the same syntax or the same concept of HTML. You should never leave HTML. You should stay always in the HTML world. So the way we add behavior but stay inside of HTML is that we have things such as tags, we have attributes, we have values, right? We have things such as that. So one of the things that we have here is the ng4. See that? ng4 is an attribute. Right? Obviously, it's not an HTML attribute, right? It's an Angular attribute. It's an extension of the HTML language, right? But that is implemented by Angular, right? Obviously, behind the scenes, this HTML page will be parsed by Angular, right? And it will add all this behavior, obviously, with JavaScript behind the scenes, right? So which is hidden from us, right, by this abstraction, right? This Angular abstraction, this Angular attribute abstraction, right? Behind the scenes, obviously, this hides tons of really cool JavaScript behavior that we don't see, right? So ng4, like the name suggests, allows you to iterate over an array. Okay, it allows you to as you iterate over that array, allows you to access each individual item in the array. And the syntax is that you can declare a local variable, let course of courses. Right, so this is going to iterate over the array of courses, and as it iterates, it's going to bind each object or each item into a local variable called course, which you can then reference and use inside of your HTML. Right, so if we go back, notice that indeed it iterated over those 4 items, right, and with some empty line items, we can fill the content, right, by doing an escape sequence of the course variable, right? So this course is bound to each one of the objects as it iterates, and I can then print the title of each one of them, right? And so notice that now I have course A, B, C, and D, right? That comes from the component. That make sense? Okay. All right, excellent. So we don't need this anymore, right? This hard-coded list of items, since now we have a dynamic array. Pretty good.